Today we are going to tell you a very interesting story, and we hope you enjoy it. The following events are taking place in the Kingdom of Wiles. Today there is a ball held by Duke Mattelio. Probably that is why all the women of the estate look excited. When the deceased Duchess was alive, magnificent balls were held every year. But this year it was difficult to prepare without a hostess. And the Duke needs to find a partner as soon as possible. And it looks like there is a fuss among the young ladies. The fair lady asked Viola if she had danced with the Duke before, and the girl replied that Duke Mattelio was indeed a fine gentleman. The Duke was the most eligible bachelor in high society, and it was no wonder that he interested Viola, and the girl didn't seem to mind being with him, except for one person, and that person was the youngest daughter of the Bears family, Adette Bears. Adette begged her mother that Viola deserved the Duke much more. But her mother was still worried about her because in 3 years, Adette had not received a single proposal, and it was decided that Adette should get married this year. Suddenly, the protagonist fainted, and everyone came to help her, and it looked like Adette was overexcited, and it made her feel bad. Adette's mother asked Maurice to call a doctor and let the girl rest, and then told Viola that it was late and they should go. Meanwhile, Maurice and Adette's little sister walked her to her room to be alone. When Adette came into the room, she took off all her clothes and changed into a man with a low ponytail and makeup on, and then she wanted to go somewhere else. Maurice told her that Madame and Miss Viola were still here, and if they accidentally crossed paths, things would be bad. The protagonist said that they should take this risk, and it was their last chance. The servant replied that he had a bad feeling it was better not to do it. The girl thanked him for his concern, but if they want to provide for their family, they have no other choice, and surprisingly this disguise is quite handy, and anyway this time it will definitely get the Duke's consent. This life is the 5th reincarnation of the protagonist, and she clearly remembers the past life since she was born. Her past life seemed to be a curse in which she lived for almost 30 years, and unfortunately, fortune always had her back turned. But in this life she was born a noblewoman and thought she would enjoy a carefree life. But who knew she would be living as the daughter of an idol? When Adette drove to the entrance to the residence of Duke Mattelio, there was a huge queue. The girl overheard a couple talking, who said that to get to the estate will take an hour, so they decided to walk in the garden. The main character was furious that they had to wait so long, and so she decided to get out of the carriage and went into the garden. And at that moment she felt something that she had felt the last time she came here. Suddenly, she saw a couple talking about something, and Adette had forgotten that on the day of the ball, there was a secret meeting place for lovers in the open garden, and she hadn't been to a ball for so long that she had almost forgotten about it, so she decided to go back before anyone noticed her. And at that moment, she didn't notice and hit her head against a man who turned out to be Duke Mattelio. From the surprise, the girl slowly started to step back and tripped on a rock and almost fell. But Adette was saved by the Duke who caught her. Suddenly, the Duke was hit by something in the back, and he could not hold the girl, so she fell to the ground. The meeting between the main character and the Duke took place about 3 months ago. There was a knock on the door, and the room entered Maurice, who brought sweets with tea and asked that the girl did not push herself too hard, to which she replied that if she didn't, Maurice would get a lot of work done, after which she sipped some tea and said that it was very tasty. Suddenly, Adette remembered that she had sent a letter asking about the investment in the ship, and asked if there had been any reply to it. The servant replied that the Duke had rejected the offer to the girl. Adette was upset and couldn't understand why, and asked if he had accepted investment rates lower than hers. But it turned out that the Duke said he didn't need the help of a female investor, which made the protagonist very angry. He's starting to annoy me, but unfortunately in this world, women rarely make a lot of money, and everyone says that a beautiful woman just needs to marry well, and that you cannot skip tea parties or dances. Also, popular phrases are that a girl should find a husband who will provide a luxurious life, and that making money is not a woman's business. I'm sorry that this world has such disgusting rules. The main character was furious, because everyone thought she would starve to death if she didn't get married, and suddenly she had an idea. She told Maurice to send the Duke again investment proposals, but this time on behalf of her maternal uncle, Viscount Tarusaf. The grandfather of the main character had one daughter after his death, No one was able to continue the Viscount's lineage, so the girl came up with the idea that she would become a man and inherit the title. It was supposed to work, but whatever happens, they have to see this investment deal through. Viola is about to get married, and Sasha will need a lot of money to make a successful debut. Moreover, her mother will never allow Viola to marry an ordinary man, because the bigger the dowry, the better. The life of a noblewoman requires much more money than Odette thought, and if her father hadn't lost his business, life would be much better. There are only a few sea-related businesses in the Kingdom of Valais, and that was the Presor Empire and the Kingdom of Valais. A year ago, Duke Metellio declared his intention to start a company to build huge ships and began to attract investors, and most likely, it was definitely a blue-chip stock. Blue-chip stocks are icons of reliability in the financial market, and so Odette had to invest in it by all means. When the Duke read the new investment letter from the Viscount, he was interested and decided that he needed to meet him in person to discuss the details. So the Duke wrote a letter for them to meet at his residence in 4 days. When Odette read the letter, she was confused and didn't know what to do, so she asked Maurice if he could go in her place. But the servant replied that perhaps the Duke remembered his face, as they had met when he had submitted the last investment application. The noblewoman decided that she would send him a reply that she would meet with him, and she needed to find a reliable assistant. For if it was revealed that Viscount Tarusaf was this woman, she might be rejected again. But if she agreed to the meeting, it might arouse suspicion, and so she had to find a way out, no matter what. After 4 days, the day of the meeting with the Duke came, and the protagonist decided that she will change into a man and thus will not cause suspicion when meeting with the Duke. And unfortunately, it was the only way out. Maurice was very worried because it was dangerous, and if she was caught, there might be trouble. Odette said that when she used to go out like that, no one noticed that she was a woman, so she probably wouldn't get caught. Maurice said that the problem was that the Duke had much better discernment than the others, but there was nothing left for the girl to do. Finding someone who looks like a nobleman but isn't one with a confirmed identity and restrained behavior during a meeting was almost impossible. The king of this kingdom is very old, besides Prince Gabriel is in charge of state affairs, and his younger brother Prince Bisho, without being present in person, led the army to victory and politically strengthened his position. The knight that contributed most to the victory was Duke Benjalisker Cade Metellio. When the protagonist came to the Duke, he politely invited her, after which the girl introduced herself as Viscount Tarusafon. This is actually a very exciting event. The Duke said that honestly, he had never heard of the Tarusaf family. Odette replied that it was because her family was on the verge of collapse, as they had barely managed to maintain their reputation and had no time to cooperate with other families. The Duke asked where they got so much money to invest, to which Odette replied that the money was left by her cousin's deceased husband. Metellio asked if he knew her sister, which made the girl wonder if the Duke knew about her family. But if she lied, it would be more difficult later, so she answered that her cousin was Viscountess Burs. It turned out that the Duke knows the family and that Viscountess Burs is a beautiful woman, and all her daughters are beautiful too. They say that the eldest daughter is very clever, and she is not as beautiful as her younger sisters. But they say that she is quite smart. They are very beautiful indeed. The protagonist was happy that the Duke knows about her. Then Metellio said that he would like to meet this lady one day. After the girl heard these words, she said that even if she is a genius, she is only a woman, and therefore, based on common stereotypes from ancient times, the role of a woman is to marry successfully, taking advantage of her beauty. The Duke asked if the Viscount really thinks so, because he thinks differently, although the Burs family has no man, but the eldest daughter manages it well, and so he is very interested in it. Really? In that case, Duke, let me remind you that you refused this girl's letter because she is a woman, saying that you don't think girls are only capable of marrying. Again repeating, I would like to remind you that in this world more like beautiful, they are intelligent women from a young age. It was natural that the younger sisters received more than Odette, and she thought that the Duke is the same, but he surprised her. The girl was amazed that he wasn't annoyed that the family was headed by a woman. The Duke asked if there was a reason why the Viscount wanted to invest in their business, and if it involved Lady Burse. The noblewoman replied that she believes in the value of seafaring and their country has made significant growth on the continent, so soon a new era will undoubtedly begin. One centered around the vast seas at such a time, large and reliable ships are most needed, or rather, the Duke's shipbuilding business. Metelio asked a clarifying question: would she invest in the business if she knew that this business would not be the Duke's? And if the answer is no, why not if she loves the sea so much? The protagonist replied that building ships is a complicated business. Ships require time, money, and advanced technology, and ships need much more, and accordingly, it is not something that can be engaged in everyone. The Duke was interested and said that he had not met a man like him for a long time, that is the Viscount. Had he known it was actually Lady Odette Beers? The rumors are definitely true, because the Duke was incredibly handsome, and the girl asked if she could ask him a couple of questions, to which Metelio replied that the Viscount can safely ask anything, but he will decide whether he will answer it. Odette said that His Excellency can handle it himself, but why is he attracting investors? The Duke replied that, as she said, the shipping business is not something that anyone can easily do, and in fact, it is a government project. Building ships is an attractive business, but since it could become a weapon against the royal family, if the Duke continues alone, he might face scrutiny from the royal family. But if there are many nobles involved, it's a different story. The girl was snapped out of her musings by the Duke and told that he wouldn't mind meeting her again, and asked when it would be convenient for her to hunt together. Against Odette's wishes, and after a while, an invitation came from Duke Metelio, and they ended up going hunting. The girl didn't really want to go hunting, but she had no choice, so she waited until the conversation finally came up about the investment. Seeing the Viscount's disinterest, the Duke said that apparently hunting was too boring for her, and unlike the owl on the royal road, there was no sea, and it could be stuffy. The Duke also wanted to share his dreams, and said that he would like to visit the owl where the Viscount lives, because he hasn't seen the sea for a long time. The protagonist replied that he could come anytime and she would take care of him. The Duke was pleased and said that since he had been invited by the Viscount, he should come. Did he really think she wanted to see him? Suddenly, he saw two hens and decided to shoot them. Then a shot rang out and he hit one of them and laughed with joy. To think that a Duke could laugh like that. It was nearing sunset, and the Duke and the Viscount were watching. Metelio said that the Viscount's domain is near the sea, so she must know them quite well. To which the girl replied that she could not say that she knew the sea well, for when she thought she understood the sea, it became unfamiliar, and when she thought she did not know it, it became familiar again. The Duke said that one thing was certain, and that was that the Viscount knew more about the sea than the Duke. The girl thought that it was understandable that she knew more about the sea than he did, because in her previous life, she had been a diver. Suddenly, Odette decided to ask the Duke if he had a lot of investors, and Metelio said that he was having so much fun that he had forgotten that they needed to talk about it. As he said that before the investments were normal, and the Viscount's investment is too big, and therefore it is desirable that the number of investors exceeds the amount invested. The protagonist couldn't understand what he was talking about and whether he was still interested in how she got the money, and suddenly the Duke said that he had actually finalized the recruitment of investors. She was dumbfounded by this information, and with despair asked why there were all these meetings. The Duke replied that at first he was interested to hear that a family he had never heard of wanted to invest a huge amount of money, and then he thought that the Viscount was a lot of fun and he wanted to keep chatting. Seeing the Viscount upset, the Duke said regretfully that he seemed to have made a mistake and should have said so from the beginning. The girl replied that it didn't matter, and that she had to return to the owl, and had no more reason to stay in the capital. The Duke, seeing this, said that he hoped they would see each other again. It was a disgusting act on his part. He had no intention of accepting this investment at all, and he had called her just out of curiosity, and so the girl decided that she hoped they would never meet again. After some time, Odette received 2 letters from Duke Metelio. In one of them, it was said that the Duke would like to discuss the attachment issue again, and he would like to meet and apologize in person. And also, if she had not yet returned to the owl, he would like her to attend the ball that would be held very soon. Another letter said that Lady Odette Beers was being invited to the Duke's ball. What a ridiculous situation. Morris asked the noblewoman what they should do because the situation was critical. When the investment plan on which the girl worked so hard failed, she immediately left the Duke. But everything that happens to some extent can be called fate. After the girl fell, the Duke recognized her and offered to take a walk, after which he asked why the Viscount came to the garden. The protagonist replied that she was bored waiting in the carriage, so he went for a walk. But the Duke, for some reason, looked at the girl strangely, and suddenly she remembered that on this day in this garden, there are secret rendezvous, and there is a probability that the Duke thinks that the Viscount is going to have a secret rendezvous, that the Duke thought the Viscount had come to this very rendezvous. But what the Duke is doing here in such a busy time is rather suspicious. Suddenly His Highness asked if the Viscount had seen a blonde man, for the garden was so large that he was not easy to find, but the girl replied that she had seen no such person. The Duke is dodgy, as the girl thought, because he creates a smokescreen in case of a scandal because of meeting a woman, after which the Duke said goodbye to the Viscount and said that they would meet at the ball. And at last the time came for that very event. The ball was so beautiful that even hard to believe that the Duke prepared everything alone all around, also talked about Countess Daisy. She was the younger sister of the previous Duchess and godmother of Duke Matilio. And here is Countess Daisy herself. Since there is no mistress in the ducal house, she helped a little, and so everyone admired the great insight of the Countess. Also, everyone at the ball was interested in who he will dance with, judging by his actions, and the Countess was also interested in who will dance his first dance with the Duke. I wondered if they knew of his arrogance. While Odette was drinking her glass, suddenly she heard herself being addressed, and so she was very frightened, but turning around she saw Viola, who was surrounded by male attention. God, she is so beautiful. So Odette thought her name was called, but luckily it was her sister. Everyone around them said that Lady Bears was really a flower of high society, and she was being courted by many men, so everyone was curious about who she would marry. If you think about it, Duke Matilio often dances with Lady Bears, and so there's a chance that this ball was organized especially for her. She was so beautiful that it wouldn't be surprising if the Duke fell in love with her. Does the Duke like Viola? Odette also wondered if the Duke might be interested in her investment just because of her sister. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mullis asked Mrs. Bears why Lady Odette hadn't come today, since her eldest daughter's wedding was important. Mrs. Bears thanked her for her concern and said that Odette was not feeling well and was resting at home. But suddenly she looked around and saw Odette carefully trying to disguise herself. Her mother then rushed towards her, but out of nowhere, the Duke appeared and started asking for permission to dance with Lady Viola. They looked so cute together. Meanwhile, the main character was trying to catch her breath, because her emotions were overwhelming her, and if she stayed here any longer, her heart would stop beating. Suddenly she heard the men talking about how the Duke seemed to be interested in Lady Bears, and he even called her by her first name, and so Dupin was not happy because he was trying to hit on Viola. But another of the men responded that it wouldn't work, and if she's targeting the Duke, it's easier for him to just give up. Dupin said that even if she is a beauty, but she is only a Viscount's daughter, and probably the Duke won't marry her. When Odette heard this conversation, she was angry because Dupin Albans crossed the line. The protagonist went to the main hall and saw the Duke dancing a waltz with her sister, and she started to worry that if the Duke is really interested in Viola, and if so, then what will happen to her, and will he think about investments like before? After a while, the Duke saw the Viscount and called him over to talk quietly. Odette asked if he would accept her investment, to which the Duke replied that he would, but there were a couple of conditions. One is to sell the area to the Owl or rent it out for a long time. According to the conditions, only a couple places are like the Owl, and so the Viscount can sell the estate or provide for a long time, and she doesn't have to pay the corresponding amount of money. The girl said that as she understood that he wanted to organize a shipping company in the Owl, and she liked the idea. In the evening, the Duke saw the Viscount off and said that they would meet after some time to sort out the documents and wished her a good journey. Suddenly he said that he hoped next time to see her in a dress called the girl's full name. Perhaps she should have disguised herself better. When the carriage left, the servant asked the Duke if everything had gone well, to which Metelio replied that after all, Lady Bears was herself to blame, and no matter how important it was, she had really come and disguised herself as a man. It turned out that when the Duke saw the letter from Viscount Tarusaf, he asked a servant to do a little investigation, and it turned out that the Viscount was indeed related to the Bers family. This family were nobles without pride, and earns with the resources of their land, and so the Duke decided that Lady Bears's investment would definitely be rejected because Baron Tarusaf was Lady Viscount Bers's late maternal grandfather, and he was dead. The Duke suggested that perhaps the letter had been sent by his son, but as it turned out, the Viscount had only one daughter, the current Viscountess Beers. From this, it was clear that this letter was sent by the eldest daughter, and she had used Viscount Dorian Tarusaf's name without any fear, and so His Highness decided that she was more problematic than he thought. The Viscount was bad at investing and running a business, and it seems his eldest daughter is very different, and there was no way he would have thought the girl would show up dressed as a man. When the Duke made inquiries about the family again, he learned a lot of things he wanted to know, and it turns out that Lady Bears has a surprisingly naive side. Meanwhile, the protagonist rode in the carriage and could not believe that he guessed that she was a girl. And the most amazing thing is that he knew about it from the beginning, knew and pretended not to notice. In the morning at breakfast, Adette was still in the same gloomy condition, so Mother decided to ask her how she was feeling, for last night she had heard a scream from her room. The girl replied that she was not well at night, but that she was all right now. Mrs. Bears said with a smile that she knows that the girl works hard for their family, and thanks to her they can live a luxurious life, so she advised not to push herself so hard. She did, because she even tried to change into a man. The mother also remembered and added that yesterday Viola had danced with an amazing man, and that man was Duke Metelio, and that these days the Duke danced only with Viola, and so everyone was jealous. Suddenly, Viola turned to the main character and said that the Duke was asking about her. When the girl heard this, she worriedly asked what exactly he said. Viola replied that the Duke was wondering how Adette was doing. When the mother heard this, then she excitedly asked if she had met the Duke. The girl replied that she met him by chance because of investments. Suddenly, Viola remembered that the Duke had praised Adette and said she was much better than most men in business. Is he kidding or what? The girl knew his intentions, and should she have been grateful that he hadn't told everyone about it? Unfortunately, she had nothing to say since she had lied. First, suddenly Mrs. Bears said she was sure there would be many events next month. Adette said to make sure Mother bought more new dresses and jewelry. After all, Viola will soon get an offer. The investment went well, so this level of spending is acceptable now. Mrs. Beers was very pleased and asked if the girl should get married this year. It must be very hard to have a mother who constantly wants to give herself away in marriage. After a while, the girl was already standing in the room with the dressmaker who was taking her measurements. Mrs. Bears asked the seamstress what colors are popular now, and she replied that red is the fashionable color now, but most likely dark green or blue satin will look good on the girl. Also, you can make lace and ribbons unusual. There are even pearls on the dress. After all these fitting, the girl decided that she would never marry again, because when she did, she would most likely die merrily. All 4 previous lives when she died young had something in common. In the first life, she was the illegitimate child of a French count on the day of the marriage of convenience. The French Revolution broke out, and the girl was executed by guillotine. In the second life, on the day she was sold as a concubine, the girl died because of an invasion by Japanese enemies. And in her third life, the day she decided to marry a man whose face she didn't even know, the Korean War broke out and she died again. After 3 months, as the protagonist began the 4th life one day, they were driving in the car, and the guy proposed to register the marriage and then hold a ceremony, and after some time to take a loan for the newlyweds, and then they can sell the house. But unfortunately, this was not destined to happen because they crashed in a car accident. So in some strange way, all lives were cut short before the main character got married. All her previous lives were short and lonely, so she just wanted to create her family. After her next death, she found herself in an empty space and couldn't believe she was here again. Then she screamed, asking the void why she was dying, just because she wanted to get married, and others say she did it twice or 3 times. But why was she dying without entering into a normal relationship, let alone marriage? So if this continues, why is the universe giving her the opportunity to be reborn? Suddenly her screams were heard. From where they came from, a bright light appeared, and a bright and large figure descended to the girl and asked the main character if she blames herself for the whole reason why her wishes are not forgotten, because she planned to get married. So far, the reason she was dying young was marriage, and it was all very strange. When the main character's life was just beginning, her mother sat and cried because she felt sorry for her daughter, because she was born with such an ugly face, and for this reason, she was worried that the girl would not be able to get married. Everyone can't be equally beautiful, can they? Everyone, for some reason, said that the appearance of the main character will prevent her from getting married. But she confidently said that this is even better. It is not so bad, because thanks to this current life, she will be able to live a long time. The protagonist was right from her debut to today she was alone and will not get married anyway. So she consoles herself with the fact that she is doing everything right. Adette thought that she would not go to the ball again, but everything turned out not as expected. When everyone was already at the ball, her mother asked Adette what she thought about Viscount Fable, and although they had a small age difference, but he was lonely, but in fact he was quite old for a girl. But her mother did not despair and began to offer new variants. But it was useless because even such men would not be interested in her, and Adette decided that she would just match the rhythm, and soon her mother would give up. Meanwhile, Duke and Viola danced in the center of the hall. Everyone admired this couple and dreamed to dance with this girl at least once, but the competition was too high. And even when it came to the eldest daughter, no one wanted to dance with her because she was ugly. Of the 2 sisters, one was a diamond and the other a pumpkin. For this reason, Adette didn't want to come to the ball, and she didn't have to listen to all this gossip at all. Suddenly, Mrs. Burrs, along with the young gentleman's mother, approached Isaac, and he greeted her. Mrs. Burrs did not miss the chance, and said that her daughter Adette was also here, but Isaac only looked at her contemptuously. He's not a handsome man himself, but he's got a crooked face. The girl introduced herself, and Isaac's mother noticed that the young lady had high manners, to which Mrs. Burrs replied that her daughter had been outstanding since childhood, and she was the pride of their family. Mrs. Mullis offered Isaac a dance with Adette, but of course he didn't want to, and heard the snide laughter of his friends nearby. Isaac reluctantly started to ask the girl to dance, but suddenly the Duke came and wanted the main character to give him her first dance. The girl extended her hand to him and they started dancing. OMG, this is a win-win. When the Duke and Adette were dancing, then Metellio remarked that he thought she was only good at riding horses, but she was also good at dancing. The girl replied that the Duke had strange hobbies. She would have preferred if he had told her everything from the beginning. The Duke only laughed. Then he took her by the waist and lifted her up, saying that he never imagined that a young lady from a noble family would appear in such a way. Everyone was delighted because the Duke was performing a dance that is only danced on debut. Adette replied that there was no other way, because he would have refused her investment because she was a woman and this contract was necessary for her. The Duke said that most likely there was a misunderstanding between them, because he refused because of the business she was doing, because he is a knight and his duty is to protect his country. He sheds blood and stands guard over the land. The act of simply buying and selling didn't look good to him. And also, in the first meeting, he tried to humiliate and drive her away. But during their dialogue, she, contrary to his expectations, presented herself as a completely different person. And that's why he liked spending time with her so much that he wants to become her friend. At that time, the dance ended. Adette bowed out, but the Duke offered her one more dance, which made the girl madly surprised, because never anyone wanted to dance with her. But here they asked for one more dance, and even all the ladies around were shocked. But does the Duke know that only lovers do that? The Duke suddenly came to visit the bear's house and apologized for his bad manners. Knowing that it was impolite for some reason, came, and unexpectedly, without even informing. The Duke asked Adette where the rest of the family was, to which the girl replied that her mother and Viola had gone out. Had he come for the Viola? Adette said that they would probably be back by the evening, But the Duke said that it was all right because he had come to see her today, and he also noticed that her younger sister looked very much like Lady Viola. "Why are you suddenly talking about it, Honorable Duke?" It turned out that Sasha was looking out of the doorway, and the Duke saw her, and so Metellio asked to introduce him to the little Lady Bears. Suddenly, Duke Metellio noticed the bookshelves and asked if these books were from the royal library, and the girl said that they were useful for business, so she often visited the library. The Duke remarked that she probably liked to read. Suddenly, flashbacks of a strange man telling her that reading was a very extravagant hobby flashed before her eyes, and the memories were not very pleasant. The Duke pulled her out of those memories and told her that she had a very good hobby, because reading was a graceful and wise hobby that, regardless of age and gender, broadened one's horizons. Adette was happy when she heard these words and asked him if he really thought so, because she completely agreed with him, and it was a pity that books are very valuable and not so easy to get them. But if book printing makes more progress, and women from noble families get easy access to books, then they too can live a better life. Without noticing it, she got carried away and started to talk too much. But the Duke listened to her attentively, and after that said that Adette showed by her example that women can also manage business, and it would be nice if women had more opportunities. Sasha also listened to all this and wanted to ask His Majesty what he thought about the lady learning magic. Adette wanted to stop Sasha. The Duke asked the girl for what purpose she wanted to do it, and Sasha answered that she wanted to become a mage, and if she had the ability, then could the Duke recommend her to Lenosia. After the girl heard this, she objected, saying, "How can one suddenly ask His Excellency for such a thing?" But she was surprised. Duke Metellio replied that he agrees, and if her family gives their consent, and in that case, he can't recommend her to me. But before he did that, the Duke decided to ask if the young lady had this gift, because he also knows how to use magic a little bit, so he offered the young lady to fill the cup with water, and in that case, he will give her a recommendation to Lenosia. At that moment, she started to cast a spell, and water appeared from above, but something went wrong, and it spilled on the Duke. Everyone was very frightened, and Sasha ran out of the room asking him to forgive her, and Adette was worried that the Duke might be angry, but Metellio calmly said that the girl had talent, and if she wanted to, she could write a recommendation. The Duke turned out to be very kind indeed. The girl handed him a towel and apologized for her sister, and did not even know where to look, did not ask what she should do with such rudeness. Sometime thinking, the Duke replied that would she be able to forget the rude joke said by His Highness the Prince? Was he worried about it? Adette agreed. Then the Duke said that after meeting her, a lot of interesting things had happened, and asked if she had forgotten the promise she had made, pretending to be a viscount, and that she would look forward to being invited to the owlery. After a while, Mrs. Bears returned to the mansion and received the two guests, and said that Duke Metellio had visited their mansion, and as they and Viola were not at home, they could not meet him, but that Adette had received the Duke well. The lady turned to Mrs. Bears and asked if she knew about Countess Daisy's house party, and that only specially invited ladies and gentlemen would be attending. It was a small party that lasted only one night. It is said that if you go there, even the elderly misses may soon marry, and it would be great if young Lady Adette could attend, and that she would certainly try to get them an invitation. Mrs. Bears admired this, and said she didn't know she cared so much for Adette. "I'm sorry she's going to have to suffer a little." Suddenly, Cottrell came in and said that a letter had arrived from the Duke's house. Mrs. Bears was glad that the Duke wanted to take a walk with her daughters. Meanwhile, at the palace, the Duke met with the Crown Princess, Alkina Elwanji. The princess noticed that the Duke is not bad-looking, and that the rumors were not deceiving her. Namely, the rumors that the Duke is going to be betrothed to an exorbitant beauty. Everyone has a keen interest in his marriage. Duke Metellio replied that he did not know that Her Highness also has an interest in it. The princess replied that he speaks as if he regrets it, and if his chosen one could not become her friend. The Duke was very surprised at the princess's words and asked himself if they could still be called friends. The boy told Her Highness the Crown Princess that the young ladies would shed a sea of tears, and even his maid, Countess Hubadin, was very upset when she heard the rumors, and he knew that she had come solely to see the Duke and therefore would not even notice him. Alkina replied that the prince should also find a good match and get married. Soon the prince replied that he didn't know that she supported him about marriage, to which the princess replied that she just hoped that he would meet a lady from the right family. The prince asked the duke about the letters if he had returned them all, and surely they must be found sooner than the crown princess does, because she has started moving people there. Your doll game is over, Alkina. The Burrs family and the duke went to the countryside. Sasha said admiringly that she loved it here and there as Lenocia right next door. Odette asked the duke to understand her sister as she is still a child, and the duke replied that if they had some time, it would be nice to visit Lenocia for a while. The girl replied that if they came too late, her mother would be worried, and they had gone far enough, to which the duke replied that it was all right, for the month herself had said it was all right to come back late. Mrs. Bierce said that they really could stay out as long as they wanted, for the whole two people might need a lot of time to talk, and the girl realized that the mother even had a plan, and no wonder they had taken too many things for an ordinary walk. Sasha saw the boat and asked Odette if she wanted to go for a ride on it, but the girl's answer was negative, and for that, Sasha got upset and said that she would like to, and they had not come here just to have fun. Sasha, seeing the Duke and Viola riding on the boat, asked why in that case they two are riding and if they are not suitable for each other. If Viola marries the Duke, will she be happy? And Odette is looking forward to her younger sister's wedding. But she is a different matter. Her life will end if she marries, and that is probably where the emptiness comes from. Seeing the Duke treating Viola nicely, Odette told Maurice that they should start preparing a dowry, because Viola will soon receive a marriage proposal, and it will be a great honor for their family. When the Duke and Viola returned, he said that it had been a long time. If they wanted to go to Lenocia, they should go now. Odette told Maurice that upon arrival, they should give the invitation to the Duke, so they should decorate the residence in the Owl. And by the way, the Owl does not collect much tax, and it was not clear what people in this territory do for a living. Maurice responded that the Owl's land is depleted and reclamation is difficult, because there are few people living in the area, so most of the residents are fishing. The category of fish and seafood is not included in the taxable goods, and then it is no wonder things are the way they are. Suddenly, Odette said to the sea that she wanted to borrow the tax code on her return, at which point she heard Viola yawn and apologized for it. Odette replied that it was okay since they had come so far, and she was starting to talk about work, and that she should be the one to apologize, and that Sasha would be late looking. But Viola replied that she was tired and wanted to rest in the carriage. The girl asked Maurice if he would stay in the carriage, and he replied that he wanted to deal with the papers, and then he would leave. Odette went outside and admired the beauty around her as suddenly she saw a suspicious man and thought that maybe it was a local magician, but he came too close to her, and the girl realized that this man is dangerous. And probably she could die, but she couldn't understand why, because in this life she didn't even dream to get married, and she didn't want to die. Someone took Odette by the shoulder and she thought it was that suspicious person, but it turned out to be the Duke, whom she looked at with tears in her eyes, and he could not understand what was the matter. Mayura said there was an intruder here, but sneaking into Lenocia is a very difficult thing to do. She has such a cool, gothic energy. The Duke was worried about Odette and asked how she was feeling and if she was hurt. The girl replied that she was fine, and so they decided to leave after saying goodbye to the mysterious girl. But suddenly she told Odette that this was the 5th time the Duke wondered what she was talking about. Miura still turned to the girl the same way, and said that this time she will definitely get what she wants. Late at night, when everyone in the carriage was asleep, Odette could not sleep, and thought about that girl, and what she had said to her, and whether she had seen all the lives she had lived, and that she would already be happy if she died a quick death, let alone to achieve her goal. After Duke Matilio's outing with the young viscountesses, word of his engagement to Viola spread even faster for the sake of finding out the Duke's feelings. Countess Daisy invited 3 people to the party. According to rumors, everyone was curious whether the Duke and Viola were engaged. At Countess Daisy's residence, everyone was doing something of their own. The Duke and Viola were playing billiards, and Maurice and Odette were doing all sorts of political things. The girl said that she was right after all. Namely, that everything that the sea brings is not included in the list of goods taxed in the Owl. They are mainly engaged in fishing, so the tax collected there is small. If they take advantage of that, they can make quite a lot of money in the owl. Morris was distracted at this time and looked somewhere, but immediately came to his senses and said that if he visited the owl, it would be good to look at the newly annexed lands. Adette looked at the Duke and her sister who was playing billiards, and behind them stood Hubadin, and in a way she is the same as before. Suddenly, a man said hello to the young lady Bears, and the girl noticed that after the dance with Duke Metelio, she was the first to be greeted by ordinary men. The Duke approached the girl and said that she was working even here, to which she replied that His Excellency wishes to visit the owl as soon as possible, so she needs to work hard. In fact, it's equivalent to saying that he's always rushing her, because of which she has a lot of work to do. Viola turned to the Duke and asked him to understand the situation, because Adette had a lot of work to do, so she didn't even want to come here, but their mother had to send her here. The Duke confessed that he was also forced to come here. Countess Daisy heard this and said that even if he didn't want to come here, but anyway he is here, and if he says that, he will never marry, so there was no choice but to forcefully bring the Duke here. Metelio decided to introduce to his aunt the young ladies from Viscount Bursa's family, and also introduced his godmother, Countess Daisy, the organizers of this party. The girls thanked Daisy for the invitation, and she thought that the lady in whom the Duke had recently shown interest was the second daughter of the Bers family, Viola Bers. When the eldest daughter of the Bers family also introduced herself, Daisy recognized her because she was at the ball and posed as an aristocrat. Countess Daisy said that she was glad to meet her and that she had changed her preferences again, so she was thinking of postponing the wedding. She also wanted to tell them the special reason for the opening of the party, because it was not the parents, but they would be able to choose their own mates when they returned to the room after the party was over. They should take the silver candlestick standing in the hall and wait. The man who liked the lady will light her candle. This is a promise to go on a date tomorrow morning, and so Daisy hopes they will meet their date soon. Adette didn't want to date anyone even under threat of death. After the party ended, Viola and Adette plumed the room to take the silver candlestick, and Viola said that from what the Countess said, the Duke did not want to marry. Adette replied that it could not be so because the Duke was in love with Viola. With innocent eyes, the sister asked if she really thought so did not agree with her. Otherwise, the Duke would have no reason to show kindness to the protagonist. After the girls had taken the silver candlesticks, there was a crowd of men lined up near the Viola, and they wanted to set fire to the candlestick, but no one approached Adette, on the contrary. But suddenly, someone came up and lit the candlestick and told them to see tomorrow at the back door in the garden. The next day, Lady Hubadin was in a hurry to get somewhere and could not understand where he had gone, for she had come all this long way here, and for whom? For then, at the end of the party, only a strange man came up, and she could not even make conversation with the Duke. She wondered whose candle he'd lit last night. I don't like her anymore. Suddenly, she saw the Duke heading towards the arbor, and she could not return without learning something. But suddenly she was called by Countess Daisy and asked where the lady was in such a hurry at such an early hour. Hubadin thought that of all people she was lucky to run into the Duke's godmother, and so she could not find anything to answer. Countess Daisy took the opportunity to invite her to breakfast, and of course the young lady agreed. Meanwhile, in the gazebo sat the Duke and sliced meat, and next to him sat the young lady Berserk. The girl could not understand where Viola was because she was also supposed to come. The Duke said that he wanted to ask the other time, but there was no opportunity, so he called Adette separately. The Duke asked if the girl remembered the stranger who had entered Lenosha that day of their walk. The girl said that because of the darkness, she could not see the details, but he had blonde hair that covered half of his face, and asked if the Duke had any idea who it could be. Metelio replied that he wasn't sure of his guesses, and the rest of the time he didn't ask anything. Whenever he appears suddenly, probably in this way, he draws a line. All they have in common is that he is her little sister's suitor, and that they are business partners, nothing more and nothing less. The girl remembered that the owl's residence had been decorated, and she would have it ready when the Duke named a day on which he could visit it. A few days later in the owlery, Adette rode horses and enjoyed life. After a while, she decided to rest and sit down by the sea, and thought that this place was suitable for a shipping company, because there was a great depth and a comfortable sandy shore. Suddenly, the girl saw that in the sea someone is swimming well, and after a while it turned out that the girl did not swim, and collected materials she was. Pity the girl who works hard at such a young age. When Adette and her horse were about to leave, she heard the screams of the girl who was trying to save her materials that were being taken away. Adette got on her horse and quickly jumped up to the guy who was trying to take away the girl's supplies, but the girl was scared and let go of them herself, causing the brazen guy to steal them and run away. What an asshole! Adette ran up to the girl and asked if she was okay, but it was worse and the girl cried. Suddenly a guy came up and said that she sparked a sense of justice and decided to help, but now this child's family has nothing to eat. Who is this handsome man who looks like he comes from a noble family? Adette replied that it was rude to the one who was trying to help, and she saw the girl run into the arms of the man, and most likely it was the girl's older brother. The man asked if she had actually helped this child, because her actions and the horse made the girl scared, and everything was taken away from her. Adette asked if it would be enough for her to reimburse the lost food, so that the girl would not have to labor at sea for a while. She also thought about the fact that an adult and healthy man was forcing his little sister to work. The man said that the nobles seemed to think that money solves all problems. Even if there were silver coins in this province, it's hard to get food on them because the landowner left the depleted land unattended. Only the locals suffer. The girl replied that now new lands have been annexed to the owl, so the situation will get better. The current owner of the owl is different from the past in all aspects. The man replied that he doubted it, because in his opinion, the nobles of this kingdom are busy making money only for themselves. The past owner was addicted to gambling, so he sold these lands at a low price, and of course the girl did not want to be considered the same. Meanwhile, the man and the girl started to leave, but Adette called out to them and asked them to wait, and then she dived into the sea to catch some materials. After a while she came out and took out a big shell and an octopus, which made the girl excited and the man shocked. When the young mistress returned home, the servants began to ask why she was so wet, and even in men's clothes. But the girl replied that Camille made her a bath because she was tired. But Camilla said that Adette had a guest, and it was the Duke. Metelio said that at last she had come, and that it was not raining, but for some reason she was very wet, to which the girl replied that he had to come in 3 days. He came arbitrarily and didn't even warn her. The Duke replied that his schedule got confused and he sent a letter, but he was ahead of him. At that moment, Camilla came and said that the bath was ready. For a while, the girl came out of the bath and was already chatting with the Duke, and he asked where the other family members were. Adette replied that they should be arriving in 3 days, and Viola will be there too. Duke said, "It seems like she really wants him to be a part of her family." The girl asked if there was anyone in the Wileys' kingdom who didn't want to be related to His Highness, and she also wanted to suggest a horseback ride tomorrow. Well, the Duke gladly agreed and thought about why the lady asked first. Adette said that today she was looking at suitable land for a shipping company, and she would like them to look at it together. The next day, Adette was about to leave, but Camille stopped her and told her that she would be in big trouble. If the missus saw her like that, the girl replied that her whole mother was coming the day after tomorrow. Camille added that in addition to that, there might be rumors that she was alone in the residence with a man, and the residence staff can see everything. The girl replied that there is nothing between her and His Excellency. Adette tried to pull ashore the Duke, who for some reason could not swim, and when she pulled him out, he was unconscious. The sea in this area is deep and suitable for large ships. There are bluffs and cliffs, which makes this place also suitable for a shipyard. A few hours earlier, Adette and the Duke were sitting and talking. Metelio said that this place was the best of the ones they had visited today. Duke asked if this was the land she had recently purchased. The girl replied that it was exactly that, but how did he know that she had bought this land? The Duke replied that lately far more than 1 and 2 people had been telling him about the affairs of the Bears family. At this moment there were some boys near the shore dragging a boat, and the Duke asked the boys to borrow the boat, and in return he offered to give money. The boys replied that they didn't need it. The Duke asked if they knew what silver coins were, but the boys kept saying that they didn't need them. At that moment Adette came up and offered them food, and the boys gladly agreed and let them borrow the boat. Duke was surprised that sandwiches were better than money for these kids. Adet asked why he needed the boat, and Matelio said that he hadn't been able to ride the boat at the lakeshore recently, so he wanted to take her for a ride. The Duke and the girl took a boat ride on the sea. It turned out that even before this event, the Duke had rented a boat together, where they took a ride with the young lady and the Bears family, because he thought the young lady liked boats. Danya said that he had heard that Adet liked the sea, so he thought she would enjoy sailing on it, and apparently he was wrong. The girl was surprised and said she liked it a lot. Looking at those children, she had a lot of thoughts in her head about what the local man said, and he said that the ruler of the lands neglected the area, so the people had a hard time making a living. While she attended balls in the capital, it was very difficult for them to find a livelihood. The Duke wanted to comfort the girl and said that it was not her fault, and it was Baron Shifford who did wrong and lost these lands in cards. The girl said that the villagers would think that she was no different from the previous owner, but Matelio hastened to change her mind and said that the villagers would soon be grateful that a person like her had become the owner of the lands. After all, she had neglected the territory, and hadn't she already made a deal with him for a shipping company? And she even dressed like a man to do so. Adet thanked the Duke for the consolation. His Excellency said that it was not a consolation, but only the truth. In this case, Adet said that she wanted to make him another proposal, and the proposal is that this place is suitable for the location of the shipyard, but it is far from the village, so during the construction, the workers will not be very comfortable. Also, the girl can prepare accommodation and a canteen for the construction workers, and it is necessary to take care of the maintenance of public order in the Owl. The Duke replied that he had not thought about this problem yet, and that when he returned to the capital, he would request a garrison. If things went well, these lands would soon become very lively. The Duke and Adet did not notice how far they had sailed from the shore. Matelio said that it seemed that the sea was helping them, because they had sailed so far without rowing. The girl who looked behind him was horrified to see that it was not help, but an ebb tide. And at low tide, the waves can easily carry away any man. The young lady decided that they should hurry back, but life had its own plans, and at that moment the boat she ran into a sharp rock, and a hole was formed in it. Water began to enter the boat, and accordingly it began to sink, and it was only a matter of time before it sank. If they could somehow swim to shore, they would be saved. The girl asked the Duke if he could swim, but he was already hysterical and began to sink. After a while, they fortunately swam to the shore, but the Duke was unconscious, because of which the girl had to give him artificial respiration. Luckily, the Duke woke up and said that if it wasn't for her, he would have had an irreparable accident, and thanked the girl for saving him. Only problem was that they had swam to a deserted island, and Adet asked if they would be rescued today. The Duke replied that when they saw the horse at the parking lot, they would definitely start looking for them. But first, he suggested to start a fire because it would save them. With the help of his magic, the Duke was able to melt the fire, and they began to warm up. Suddenly, the girl noticed that she felt with the Duke not as usual, or maybe it was because they were stranded on a deserted island. Just the two of them. Adet was embarrassed, and the Duke looked at her and concluded that maybe she had a fever. The girl replied that most likely it was because of the fire. Mateleo was glad that she was not sick and must be tired, so he suggested that she sleep. Anya fell asleep, but after a while, she had to wake up because it started to rain, and the Duke said that there was no point in drying her clothes, and if her body temperature dropped, it would be dangerous, so he took off his shirt and covered the girl with it. Adet was very embarrassed and worried because he was too close to her. They looked so cute with each other. Matelio said they would just stand like that for a while because the temperature changes are dangerous to the heart. When the rain stopped, the rough wanted to light a fire, but the wood was wet and so they couldn't light it and call for help. They had to find some other way. Suddenly, Adet came up with an idea, but the Duke would have to take off his shirt. When he did that, the girl started to make a kite, and launching it into the sky, they could call for help. Anya ran like that for 30 minutes, but there was no result. Unfortunately, the failure continues, so the Duke suggested the girl to rest and try it herself. But Odette insisted and said that she wanted to try one more time, and then she scattered, and the kite flew high into the sky, and the sight was really amazing. The girl started to step back a little, but she didn't notice when she bumped into the Duke. He put his arm around her face and told her to rest and that he would take her place. After a while, a boat arrived on the island and took them to the other shore, and luckily the fisherman even lent the Duke his shirt. The man said that he didn't usually take this route, but he saw something in the sky and decided to see what it was. The Duke thanked the girl for coming up with such a great idea, at which time the Duke's servants came running in. They started worryingly asking if he was all right. Mattileo noticed that they were quick enough to find him. The servants said that fortunately, this fisherman found them and told everything the Duke said, to give the fisherman 3 gold coins and some food, and also a good shirt for his help. The servant noticed that Odette began to fall, and the girl herself could not understand what was happening to her. And for some reason, she wanted to sleep very much, and then she fainted. 2 days later, Odette arrived at home with a high fever. Mrs. Bears was worried and asked what happened to her. Camille said that yesterday on a walk, the lady got caught in the rain, so she fell ill. After a while, the Duke arrived and they all sat down to dinner, but the protagonist lay in her room and sad, thinking that they are probably fine even without her also. She felt disappointed that all day just lying in bed. When it became morning, then she went out to the balcony and saw Duke who was training Camilla. When she saw this, she said that Madame was contraindicated by the cold wind and quickly pushed her back into her room. Camille, telling her to rest and get well soon, and then she could have dinner with the Duke and even ride horses. The girl thought about the fact that even if she got better, it still wouldn't happen. There was Viola for him to spend time with. Odette looked out the window and saw Mattileo teaching Sasha how to ride a horse. Her sister saw the girl and said His Excellency taught her how to ride a horse, very happy. The Duke asked Odette how she was feeling. The girl said that she was much better, and His Majesty was happy to hear that. Viola looked at Odette strangely, and the girl remembered her conversation with Camilla, who asked if she was sure that nothing had happened with the Duke, because if Viola found out, she might get upset. In that case, Odette should make sure that the people in the residence don't talk. Sasha shouted for her sister to get ready so they could go to their shore. Odette answered that she couldn't yet and would rest for a while and wish them a good walk. Most likely due to her illness, Odette had become weaker in spirit as well. When the Duke and Viola will get married, the protagonist will often observe a similar picture, which she for some reason does not want, and on the one hand, it is even a little funny. Suddenly came the Duke, and Odette was surprised to see him here. Odette asked why he was awake at such a time, and he didn't answer that sleep doesn't come to him, and also asked if the girl was feeling well. Odette replied that from tomorrow, they can plan the schedule together. Duke was happy and said it was late and offered to walk her to her room. If you think about it, even at the Countess party the Duke didn't escort Viola, but her. But it is not clear why Duke Mattileo shows kindness to Odette. After the Duke escorted the girl to her room, he kissed her hand tenderly and said goodnight, and for some reason, the skin he touched with his lips was burning. The girl went to bed and could not understand why she had fever again, and whether it could be because she had feelings for the Duke. In the morning, Camilla knocked on the young lady's door to wake her up, and then she began to dress the girl and was glad that the young lady had already recovered. After Odette was ready, she hurried downstairs to her family. At once, she heard her mother saying that she was sorry that it was time for the Duke to leave. Mattileo thanked Mrs. for her words and said that he would like to stay here longer, but there were still some things to deal with in the capital. When the girl heard this, she was surprised and asked him if he was really leaving today, because last night he had not said anything to her. Mrs. Bears said that His Excellency and Viola had decided to return to the city. Speaking of which, Viola has some business to attend to too. They must have really decided to get engaged. Odette was upset, but what could she expect, because for days she had been close to the Duke, as if she was a special person to him. But in the end, she was worried and disappointed. As Viola and the Duke rode in the carriage, the young lady asked for a formal confession, but Mattileo didn't know what she was talking about. Thinking of all, the young lady burst confident. At Duke Mattileo's ball, Viola noticed that the Duke was interested in Odette. He talked about how it looked like the First Lady was busy and at work on business, and it was clear that he had been interested in Odette from the beginning, and now it seemed like they were suddenly close. The Duke replied that he didn't know what she was talking about. Viola replied that Odette is not smart in love affairs, and she always thinks about her family first, and she is not honest with her feelings. Also, the girl added that she kept silent only because she had heard rumors about Viola and the Duke. She also asked His Excellency to be more careful and decisive because, as far as he knows, it is the girl who is having a hard time. Of course, he doesn't want Odette to be surrounded by scandalous rumors because she doesn't marry at her age. She says that they shouldn't even see each other if they are just friends, but need to date as a couple. It is true that the Duke is happy to be around the lady, but he has never once thought of marrying her. One day during the training, Kamish came to the Duke and said that he received a message and that the young lady Lady Bears came to him, and she spoke as if she had a very urgent matter to the Duke. At that very second, Metellio went to help her. When he entered the room, he saw a worried Odette, and as soon as he saw her expression, he realized that his thoughts were arrogant. The girl asked if he had planted the violet in front of the mansion yesterday. The Duke replied that Viola said she had business to attend to and asked him to drop her off in front of the dressing room, and he offered to wait for her, but she refused to the end and asked what was wrong with the young lady. Odette said in a trembling voice that Viola had disappeared somewhere. Suddenly the Duke was struck, and he remembered the sheet that Viola had given him and asked him to give to Odette. It said that Viola was very sorry that she was about to move far away with her favorite person. She loved her family, but there was no way she could give up on that person, and asked her not to look for her. It was definitely Viola's handwriting after all. She was not kidnapped, and she escaped on her own, but with whom the Duke said, "I don't know what happened, but if Odette needs help, she can contact him anytime." The girl politely declined, and thought about the fact that in order for her to find the Viola, she would greatly need the Duke's help. But how could she say that kindly, ask him to find the girl who had apparently run off with another man? The Duke asked if the young lady Viola had run away. The protagonist thought, that is why she does not like men who are quick-witted, because she did not know what to say, and said that it is still unknown. Suddenly, a servant came running and said that the butler Catral sent an urgent letter to Odette, and this letter contains the whereabouts of the young lady Viola. Things were spinning at the Burrs mansion. Miss Burrs couldn't how he could repay their favor in such a way, and most likely there would be constant ridicule. It turned out that young Mrs. Viola had run away with Maurice. This could not be so, because there was not even a hint of it. Suddenly, the girl remembered how she had told Maurice to start preparing a dowry, and that it looked like Viola would soon be married. And she remembered Viola asking about the business, and all the puzzles came together. And finally, the girl realized why she was asking about it. And Maurice had visited the boarding house a few days ago, and they say 3 days ago, he ran away with some girl. Maurice left a letter for Mrs. Burrs. The letter said that they planned to go to the Presser Empire, although he decided to follow young Mistress Viola's wish to leave this place. But she can't handle the life of a commoner. In 4 days, they will be arriving abroad, and he asks by all means to come and change young Mistress Viola's mind, and hopes that she will come before it is too late, and so Maurice will wait for Lady Odette. Because of Maurice, Odette now has to change into a man again. The Duke has noticed that it suits the girl, as he wore it in his youth, and he is glad that it suits her. The girl disguised herself for safety reasons, as there are many bandits in the border area. Odette apologized to the Duke for taking advantage of him to this extent. Metellio replied that every hour counts here, so this matter cannot be delayed, and he has sent a messenger bird to the border which may take time, but they will have to travel all night without stopping to catch up with them. Odette thought about the fact that he was almost betrothed to Viola, but reacted as if he didn't care, which made the girl sincerely apologize to his superiority. Metellio replied that everything was fine, and she didn't need to worry about him, and most likely, she thought that he was going to marry the young lady Viola. But in fact, it wasn't so. She had no reason to feel uncomfortable around him. Odette couldn't understand why he was helping her. Herza read her mind and said it meant nothing because he thought she had doubts about the reason for his kindness, and thought it was the whim of a boring nobleman. Metellio asked what she will do when she meets the young Viola, The girl replied that it would be right to take her away before the rumor spreads. If it gets out and scandalous rumors spread, the current family business and investments will turn into a bubble. First, Odette wants to hear Viola's story. The reason she made money is because of what she couldn't do past lives, namely protect the fortress called family. If for the sake of protecting and the fortress she will bring Viola home, will her family be happy? The girl thought that the scandalous rumors would eventually subside, and she could pick up the business again. But Viola will have to hide all of herself for the rest of her life to preserve her family's honor, and the girl wants her to be happy. The Duke said that she is much more romantic than he thought, and suggested to be realistic. A young lady who has lived her whole life as an aristocrat will become a commoner in one morning. The Duke was right. Didn't she know what it was to be flattered out of her skin for survival? If she even realized it, then they were already going to choose such a life. 2 days later at the border, Odette and the Duke were looking for Viola, and luckily, she found her and her sister rushed to escape, but Maurice stopped her. Odette suggested Viola talk to her, and she agreed. The sister asked if she could just pretend she didn't see her. While the sisters were talking, Maurice thought about the fact that he never thought she would come alone. But to have her with Duke Metellio, it was very unexpected. When Viola was planning her escape, Maurice tried to explain that no matter what she thought, it was not as it seemed. I know the Duke, he would not sit idly by, and the young mistress would be in trouble. Viola replied not to worry. Viola thought that Duke Metellio didn't want to marry her. He is interested in her family, but only because of Odette, and he will help Odette if she is in trouble. The protagonist asked her sister if she would regret it. Viola said that, as she said there would be hard moments. But this is the life she has chosen. She has always lived it as others expect her to live it. But when she fell in love with Maurice, she realized what she wanted. If she married the man her mother chose, she could live a comfortable life. But she would only deceive her heart, and she would be sure that if she was with Maurice, she could overcome any difficulties. Odette listened to her, and yet agreed with her in all the time she had never once tried to listen to Viola, and judged her happiness by her own standards, and hope it wasn't too late. After that, she handed Viola a pearl necklace, said she was in a big hurry, so this is all she has. Odette hugged her sister, and told her that if things got hard for her to come back anytime. After that, the protagonist turned to Maurice and said that as a punishment for him deceiving her, if Viola cried, she would come to him. After which, everyone said a friendly goodbye and left. Odette and Metellio rode in the carriage, and the girl did not like that the road here is just terrible. When they went to get Viola, she was so out of sorts that she did not notice it for the 3rd day without sleep, and not in one eye. The Duke noticed that the lady was very heavy and asked if she was all right. Odette replied that she was not all right. Metellio suggested that she rest for a while because he had a property nearby, and it would be a great idea to go there and rest. After a while, they arrived at the property of Duke Metellio's family. The girl asked to see His Excellency and said that it would probably be better to go back, because her mother would be worried about her. The Duke replied that he would send a letter to Mrs., and after all, if the girl languished for a period, she might get sick like last time. The girl thought about how honestly worrying about her mom was half an excuse. The protagonist didn't know what she should do if rumors started about the eldest daughter of the family not walking around in men's clothes. Metellio said that she looks gorgeous, even in men's clothes. He reached his hand to her face and ran his hand through her hair, telling her not to worry. When the Duke and Odette came to the castle, they were met by the servants who were surprised that he had brought the girl here. There were hard looks around, and everyone misunderstood everything. The Duke introduced the girl and told her not to make her uncomfortable, and that they would rest and leave tomorrow, so he said to prepare everything for her. As Odette lay in the bath, she thought that enough would be enough from that day, and she would no longer ride in rented carriages. After all, it was nice to live a life that was cared for, but to leave everything and run away was quite a brave act. The girl didn't realize how strong the love must be to come to such a decision. When Odette and Viola were chatting, that she asked her why she didn't say anything when the rumors about the Duke and Viola were circulating. Sister replied that she needed this stooge to make the hesitant Maurice act. Thanks to this, she also learned about the other person's true feelings. So the best decision is to do what the heart says. Also, the mother wanted a good relationship between Duke Metelio and their family, so Viola proposed Odette to marry him instead of her. But the protagonist replied that there will be no marriage because she wants to enjoy this life for a long time. Suddenly, the girl heard that there was some noise behind the door, and the prince came into the bathroom looking for the master, and after making sure that he was not here, he ran out of the room. After a while, Metelio came into the room and saw Odette crying and wrapped in a towel. A servant reprimanded him because there was a lady in the room. The Duke immediately turned away and said that because of the loud noise, he thought that an intruder had entered the room. The servant said that the intruder was indeed here. His Highness Wishot suddenly went into the bathroom of the lady, must have been very frightened. Understandably, the Duke started to scold the prince for his behavior, but Wishot said it was a mistake and apologized to the lady. But the Duke was not happy with such an apology and ordered him to apologize politely. Wishot restated his apology and said that he was sorry for peeping on the lady in the bathroom. Even though it was a mistake, he still did a great foolishness towards the lady. The prince asked that it wasn't too summer to pick up the ball because he really thought that he had an intruder. Metelio said that he came even though he wasn't invited, and even when he picked up the sword, the prince couldn't say anything. Wishot said that because he had rented a carriage to leave the capital with the girl, he thought it was an escape for love, and he could not even think that he would return with the young lady bears. Meanwhile, the girl thought about what must be Sasha. Now it is very difficult to take care of her mom. Suddenly, the Duke said that he is going back to the capital because he has a lot of things to do there. The principal asked if he would send a letter to Mrs. Wood that solved the problem. Normally, Mom would be happy about the letter, but now that Viola had run away, this letter would only aggravate her stress. Metelio said that then tomorrow, the young lady Burse would go first, and Wishot would go with the Duke to hunt. But the prince replied that he wants to go with another young lady, and he wants to take this opportunity to make friends. The Duke replied that it would be difficult for the young lady to get to know him. The prince asked what exactly is the difficulty here. The girl thought that the more the Duke stands up for her, the more active becomes the resistance of the prince. In that case, she turned to His Highness and said that she was honored that he thought of her positively to his wish and would stay.